Nazim Madatov Audiobook The Ideal President, First Part. Eva Miller was an ordinary child in an ordinary American family. Almost nothing from her peers, she did not differ. The only thing that distinguished her from her peers is a good command of the Russian language. And it happened so. Her parents stayed late at work and they urgently needed a nanny for their only daughter. So they did not hesitate to take an emigrant from Russia, Shatalova Natalia Leontievna. Natalia Leontievna in Russia worked as a teacher of junior classes in Russian language, and she in the US needed at least some work. Natalia Leontievna took an energetic approach to learning English, and this is where Eva's preparation for school came in handy. Natalia Leontievna worked with Eva on all her English homework and taught her Russian at the same time. In high school, Eva chose Russian as a foreign language. At the moment of graduation, Eva was fluent in Russian, and Natalia Leontievna mastered English quite well. For Eva, Natalia Leontievna was not just a babysitter, she had a heart for her and treated her as the closest person, and this affection was mutual. They participated together at all school events and often went for walks. Especially interesting for Eva was a visit to the zoo, and every visit to the zoo was a real holiday for Eva. When Eva grew up and could do without a nanny, she still insisted that the nanny continued to work for them as a housekeeper. Already in her school years, Eva showed great interest in international events and world politics. She listened avidly to her nanny's stories about Russia and participated with interest in all kinds of movements, be it ecology, human rights and elections. So when she left school, she decided to continue her studies either in law or in world economics, history and international relations. She applied to several top universities in Washington, D.C., New York and her hometown of Baltimore. Johns Hopkins University was particularly interested in her, as they needed applicants who were fluent in Russian. The university interviewed Eva and confirmed her fluency in Russian. Eva was accepted to the university on fairly favorable terms, which would be renewed each year if she was successful in her studies. Her studies at the university were quite stressful, as she needed daily homework to master the material she had studied. She made a lot of new friends and new interests, but every chance she had to visit her nanny, and going to the zoo was always a pleasant pastime for her. Already at the beginning of her studies, she was interviewed and told that if she wanted to earn extra money, the university would be interested in her work as a translator from Russian of all kinds of text and audio materials. The only condition is that all these materials are strictly secret at the university, and any disclosure of any material could deprive her of this job. The payment for this work allowed her to become completely financially independent, so she agreed without hesitation. To protect her from disclosure of materials, Eva must. To protect against disclosure of materials, Eva had to translate in specially protected premises and hand in her smartphone at the entrance. Usually there was one senior employee in the room who gave materials and accepted translations, but sometimes specialists related to this material could also be in the room. Eva did not understand much of the translated materials, but it was clear that these materials concerned military developments in Russia, as well as in other countries from where Russia was able to somehow get these materials. There were some materials that aroused Eva's keen interest, although she did not show it. These materials concerned the study of chimpanzee brain in Russia and other countries. Comparative study of chimpanzee and human DNA, as well as the possibility of detecting mutations of individual DNA nucleotides. Eva decided to dig in the internet to learn about it as much as possible and remembered some postulates on this subject. The brain of a human baby contains 100 billion neurons, and after birth their number stops growing. With human growth, the number of connections between neurons, so-called synapses, about 100 trillion of them in total, grows. 0.90% of synapses are formed after birth during the whole life, and here the decisive role is played by the domestic environment and professional activity of a person. That is, the human brain is plastic. The brain of a chimpanzee is almost static and practically stops in development by 2 to 3 years old, having learnt all its genetic information. Chimpanzee DNA is 98% the same as human DNA. But if we consider that the cause of such a genetic disease as muscular dystrophy lies in the mutation of a single nucleotide, and there are more than 6 billion nucleotides in DNA, it becomes clear that 2% is a huge figure. Today, 2,320 genes unique to humans and 367 genes, in common, with chimpanzees have been identified. Mutation of one of these genes can cause such a human disease as autism, in which a person's cognitive function is destroyed. Chimpanzees live in complex social groups called communities. Within a community, the status of the individual dictates a certain social hierarchy. The dominant male is called the alpha male. The alpha male has the highest social position, he rules the group and maintains order during disputes. In chimpanzee society, the dominant male is not always the biggest and strongest, but rather he is most likely the most skillful manipulator, able to control what happens within the community. But the most interesting thing for Eve was that although all chimpanzees in the community have the same DNA, almost all chimpanzees that once had the status of alpha male or that claimed this status had the same mutation of the same gene, which can be detected by special sensors. The same gene is found in humans. It was also interesting that former alpha males with the same mutation, who had given up their powers due to old age, were especially respected in the community even by the current alpha male. The materials for translations were usually brought by the same employees and Eva knew many of them by name. Eva was very attractive and this did not pass by the attention of the employees, especially young ones, who brought materials to the closed translation center. They tried to give her all kinds of attention. One of the specialists named Victor, who dealt with chimpanzees, also tried to give Eva signs of attention and Eva once casually asked if it was possible to test gene mutation in humans as in alpha males. Victor smiled and said that Eva apparently did not see the huge difference between the brain of monkeys and humans. A human being has the potential to become anything from the day he is born. He has a plastic brain and if he perseveres in learning a craft, he will eventually become a master of that craft, be it music, science, medicine, or politics. In the same way, any person can potentially master the science of managing society at any level, including at the level of the president. The main thing here is the trust of the society to him, because he has to pass the elections, and for this it is important to pass all the steps of the career ladder. This conversation was closed and Eva never tried to return to this question. But one day Victor reminded Eva about her request and said that if she still had interest in this topic, he could help her. The corporation where Victor works is engaged in development of hardware and software sensors that allow to detect mutations of different human genes. Although the purpose of these developments is to detect and treat human genetic diseases, the developed device can have military application, so it is strictly classified. From the point of view of medicine, mutation of the alpha gene of the male does not lead to any diseases and therefore the corporation is not interested in it. But Victor managed to persuade the corporation management to allow to create a simplified version of the device, set up exactly to detect the mutation of the alpha male gene and tacitly connect to the search for such people volunteers. And if Eva is still interested, he can show the work of the ready device somewhere on neutral territory. They agreed on the place and time of the meeting. It was a cozy cafe with few visitors. Victor took out of his bag a device similar to a smartphone and showed how it worked. Actually, the device was based on a smartphone and if the device fell into the wrong hands no one would guess about its special capabilities. In the photography mode a person brings the device close to the face and when the image suits him and he presses the button to take a picture. At this time in addition to photographing and recording sound, the mutation of the alpha male gene is detected and the results are recorded in a separate encrypted file. Victor said that he could install the codes of this program with its sensor on Eva's smartphone, but for security reasons it would no longer be possible to change the program or install it on another smartphone. Eva handed Victor her smartphone, and a few days later received it back. Victor reminded Eva how to use the program and asked her, if she finds such a person, to send him his data and photo. Most importantly, Victor asked to keep the special features of this smartphone strictly secret. Since then, Eva has taken many photos with scanning under the guise of selfies, but not a single case of alpha male gene mutation has been found. In the meantime, her university studies were coming to an end and she had to decide on her future job. One day Eva came across an advertisement from the U.S. Department of State for a job at the U.S. Agency for International Development to work in Central Asia, where it was emphasized that knowledge of the Russian language was an advantage. Eva filled out and submitted her application form via the website, and after a while she was invited for an interview. First of all, the committee was interested in the fact that she was fluent in Russian language. Other knowledge of history, economics and political system in the region was not of much interest to the committee, as the applicant had to pass the relevant preparatory course. Eva's knowledge of Russian language and her studies in international law at the university played a decisive role in getting her a job at the agency on contract. After successfully graduating from the university, Eva took some time off to visit her favorite nanny, who shared fond memories of her life in Uzbekistan, and went to Washington to apply for a job. She was sent to a 3-month USAID course to work in Central Asia. The course focused on the political and economic situation in the former Soviet republics of Central Asia, as well as a 5-year social innovation program in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. The social innovation program in the 3 Central Asian republics had 4 interrelated components. The first was to build a community of socially responsible youth leaders. The second was to strengthen the role of civil society in promoting transparency and accountability. The third is to increase the ability of civil society to respond effectively to emerging opportunities. The fourth is the institutional development of non-governmental organizations. At the same time, it was possible to successfully graduate from the Youth Leadership Academy in Central Asia and provided for numerous grants. In addition, the agency's project to develop all components of entrepreneurship and the business environment in Central Asia was studied. These projects involved several thousand applicants, and Eva decided to finally check whether her smartphone works as a DNA sensor or not. Arriving at the place and getting acquainted within these republics, with whom she was supposed to work, she also registered at the U.S. embassies in these republics, where she received the necessary instructions on safety rules. Eve's idea of electronic registration of applicants on a smartphone using a special program in the agency was perceived positively, as this would allow for each program of social innovations online to receive a list of applicants and participants on a computer with their photos and personal data, as well as track their progress in study. On the smartphone itself, in encrypted form, information was stored about the presence of the male alpha gene mutation among applicants. Information about the presence of an alpha male mutation in applicants was stored in encrypted form. After the electronic registration of applicants was completed, Eva got acquainted with the encrypted scan results and finally found the only positive result. This was an applicant in the Social Innovation Program in Uzbekistan in the component of building a community of socially responsible youth leaders. His name was Timur Karimov. Eva decided to get to know Timur better to understand how he differs from other applicants. Eva became very close to the teachers of the group where Timur was studying and sometimes asked how the teaching process was going in the group. This played its role, and in the first case of temporary absence of the teacher, she was offered to practice teaching herself. Eva prepared very responsibly for each lesson, so that the group respected her as an expert in her subject. This went on for about a week, and Eva finally made up her mind. Once at the end of the lesson, she asked Timur to stay and said that she would like to get acquainted with life in Uzbekistan in an informal way and if Timur could help her with this. Timur readily agreed, but asked Eva to dress a little simpler so that she would not stand out in the crowd. Timur suggested to start the tour with the bazaar, because in Uzbekistan, and especially in Tashkent, they are huge. Vegetables, fruits and all sorts of goodies pleasantly surprised Eva. Suddenly her eyes fell on a group of very poorly dressed people. Timur explained to her that they were refugees from Afghanistan, ethnic Uzbeks. In August 2021, when the Americans left Afghanistan, there was real chaos there. And since Afghanistan also borders Uzbekistan, ethnic Uzbeks have mostly flocked there. After all, Uzbekistan is a secular state with an abundance of food. We spent 20 years building a secular state in Afghanistan, but it didn't work out, said Eva. Timur answered Eva that he could give his opinion on this issue if Eva was interested. In democracies, a dilemma often arises, Timur continued, to act not very popularly, but within the framework of the fundamental national interests of the state, or to pursue policies that temporarily bring great popularity among voters. It was in the national interests of the United States to build a secular, democratic society in Afghanistan that is friendly to the United States. Both Biden and Trump are highly experienced politicians and they understood this very well. But many U.S. voters are fed up with 20 years of their 10,000 troops in Afghanistan, and the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan promised to significantly increase the rating of the U.S. presidential candidate. That is, there was a dilemma, either the fundamental national interests of the United States and losing the election, or the politics that was popular at that time. But Eva objected here, but how many US troops should have been in Afghanistan? There is a biblical story of the prophet Moses, replied Timur, who, in order to rid the people of Israel of the prejudices of the past, led them through the desert for 40 years. So, Timur continued, the United States could build a secular democratic state in Afghanistan, but not earlier than in 40 years. And the premature withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan in August 2021 was an irreparable mistake, for which many have to pay today. It's not like the season. Probably, these are still refugees from partial military mobilization, Eva said after a short pause. It's generally not clear how the war between Russia and Ukraine will end. Both Putin and Zelensky are today national leaders with a huge rating and none of them intend to concede. Is there any way out? What do you think? Asked Eva Timura. The situation has really gone too far. If I had been told at the beginning of 2014 that Russia and Ukraine would embark on a path of irreconcilable military confrontation, which would lead to a real war with many thousands of casualties and no end in sight, I would never have believed it. After all, Russian-Ukrainian relations in all spheres of science, technology, culture, tourism after 1991 were rapidly developing. And it was good for all bordering states of Europe and Asia. Planes flew, trains, buses, private cars, economy, culture, tourism worked. And all this was destroyed to the ground in the name of the fact that some part of the Russian population and military insistently demanded to take back Crimea at any cost. I am convinced, said Timur further, that it was in the national interest of Russia to recognize the territorial integrity and inviolability of the existing borders of the CIS states, which was done by Yeltsin in 1991. And now there is actually the only option left for a decent peace for both sides. But for this purpose the parties should be fought to exhaustion and mature to the understanding that it is impossible to win this war, and for the only option of peace worthy for both sides, the Constitution of Russia and the Constitution of Ukraine should be amended accordingly. And the USA can be the most successful mediator in these negotiations. But actually this conflict has an underwater, invisible part, which can explode at another time and place. Eva asked Timur to tell in detail about this invisible problem. Today all 193 United Nations (UN) member states have their own state languages. 6 languages, Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, Spanish and Spanish, have the status of official United Nations (UN) languages. Russian has had the hardest time getting this status. After all, 27 million of the 71 million victims of the Second World War were Russian speakers. Today, for global rapprochement of peoples and diffusing interethnic tensions, it is more urgent than ever to adopt a United Nations (UN) resolution or declaration on the mandatory granting of at least one official United Nations (UN) language the status of a language for interethnic communication, at the option of each United Nations (UN) state with other state languages, although it will be very difficult to adopt such a resolution. I understood what you are getting at, said Eva Timur. You want to say that if Ukraine would give the Russian language the status of a language for interethnic communication, the situation would not be so acute. But the Ukrainian language needs protection, otherwise Ukraine will lose its identity. Timur objected. Today, for admission to the civil service in Ukraine, as in other states, it is required to perfectly know the state language, and this is quite enough for its widespread protection. And conflicts of this kind are already smoldering in other places. That's probably all for today. I got a lot of impressions, thank you very much, said Eva to Timur. I would like to continue my acquaintance with Uzbekistan in other areas of your choice. Of course, I am always ready, said Timur and continued. Eva, I have a long-standing project about a unified alphabet for internet communication. Could you help me to organize a small discussion of this project with your experts in these fields, because they could help me to understand the prospects of this project? I will try, said Eva, but first I have to get acquainted with this project in detail. 2 weeks passed before Eva managed to agree with the agency's specialists on the date of the discussion. The discussion began without unnecessary preamble, and the floor was immediately given to Timur. Today, 2/3 of the world's population, Timur began, speak one of the 23 most widely spoken languages. Each language has its own alphabet and its own script, be it hieroglyphics or right to left. This is a serious obstacle to global convergence of speakers of different languages on the internet. The situation is reminiscent of the 15th–16th centuries, when the lack of a unified number system in the world complicated the development of economy and trade. In the Arab Caliphate, the decimal number system became widespread after al-Khwarizmi, an outstanding scholar from ancient Uzbekistan, wrote the Book of Indian Counting in the 820s, i.e. 1200 years ago. At that time he was in charge of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. And only after 7 centuries in the 16th century, in Russia in the 18th century, the decimal number system was widely spread and recognized in Europe under the name of the Arabic number system. Today we can say with full responsibility that for global communication in the Internet of speakers of different languages we need a single Internet alphabet. The main requirement for the Internet alphabet is that its letters and their combinations must sound the same, regardless of the language and in which part of the word they are written. The unified Internet alphabet will allow to make a sufficiently accurate computer transcription of any words in any language in this alphabet, whether it is hieroglyphics or writing from right to left, which will allow you to read and sound out words, even without knowing the language. You can ignore the strong accent arising in this case, the main thing is that you understand the native speakers of this language. Here the question arises, and what should be the Internet alphabet? Undoubtedly, the basis of the Internet alphabet should be the familiar letters of the Latin alphabet, which are used in many languages, although they sound differently in different languages. It is only necessary to fix a single sound for each letter, regardless of the language from which the word is transcribed. 26 Latin letters in the Internet alphabet are proposed to have the sound of the letters as accepted by International Civil Aviation Organization (ICAO), but with 2 exceptions. Since the sound sh is missing, the sound *W instead of whiskey should be sheriff, the sound *Q instead of Quebec should be lawyer. Thus the Latin letters in the Internet alphabet are proposed to have the following sound. Latin A in the Internet alphabet is suggested to sound like the word alpha. Latin B is Bravo. Latin C is Charlie. D equals is Delta. E equals is Echo. F equals like Foxtrot. G equals like Golf. H equals like a hotel. I equals like India. J equals like Juliet. K equals like Kilo. L equals like Lima. M equals like Mike. N as November. O equals like Oscar. P equals like Papa. Q is lawyer. R equals like Romeo. S equals like Sierra. T equals like Tango. U equals is uniform. V equals is Victor. W equals is sheriff. X equals is X-ray. Y equals like a Yankee. Z equals like Zulu. But the Latin alphabet with 26 letters will not be enough to read an understandable sounding of all kinds of words in any of the most common languages. It is necessary to add 4 letters from Cyrillic alphabet, which will make up for the missing sounds, letters, of the Latin alphabet. First letter, a brilliant invention in the Cyrillic alphabet that allows you to distinguish, for example, the Russian words, chalk, and, stranded, ardor, and, dust. Second letter, Y, to distinguish, for example, the Russian words, cute, and, soap. Third letter, from the expanded Cyrillic alphabet. It sounds like the letter A in the Russian word, ball, meat. The fourth letter, O, is also from the expanded Cyrillic alphabet. It sounds like the letter E in Russian word, ice, honey. As for the layout of the 4 additional letters of the Internet alphabet, Y, O, on the Latin computer keyboard, they can be placed instead of service characters less than, greater than, less than, greater than, less than, greater than, less than, greater than. The advantage of the Internet alphabet is especially clear when comparing it with the official transcription, transliteration, in Russia of names and surnames for passports, driving licenses and sporting events. In the official transcription, transliteration, the letter Z is transformed into ZH. In the Internet alphabet we offer J, S, is transformed into SHCH, we offer W. The following letters are transformed as Y equals Y, equals IE, letters E equals E, I equals J are equated to each other, and is skipped at all. At the same time Latin letters W, X, Q, J are not used at all. All this leads to serious errors and distortions. That's all for now. If you have any questions. One of those present asked Timur. The English language has its own transcription of 44 sounds, so why do you need this transcription? Yes, I know, answered Timur. But the transcription of 44 sounds letters is necessary for those who want to perfectly learn the pronunciation of English words, We offer a universal transcription of any words in any language on the Internet alphabet of 30 familiar letters. This will allow you to read and sound words, even without knowing the language. Those who communicate on the Internet with speakers of other languages or want to read words in an unfamiliar language, especially if the writing of this language is hieroglyphics or writing from right to left in Arabic script. This concludes the first part of the audiobook of The Perfect President.